Okay, so Art 1 students, as you can see, I've done a little more work on the turtle, just so that you can see sort of how those colors mix, blend, merge, overlap, and go from one to the next chronologically, for lack of a better word. I do want to show you a little bit of finishing this area, because remember, this is still my sketch. It is not necessarily my finished product. So I do not want to overdo it at this point, but I do want to make sure that you guys have a pretty substantial demo piece. So anywhere, again, looking at that reference image, where I have the darker spaces, what I'm going to do is press down harder. So anything that looks darker, whether it's a shadow or a shape, or anything like that, if it looks darker on my reference image, I'm going to make it darker on my image. It sounds rather simple and self-explanatory, but it is something that you have to actually consciously think about, especially when you are shading in the sequence of the color wheel rather than just the colors that you see. So here I'm just adding a little bit of detail to the fin or the arm or whatever you would call it on a sea turtle. Just matching what I see on the example that I have on my reference image. Noting that as the fin goes back, not only does the fin get lighter, but so does the pattern. So again, I do not have all of the detail in this sketch because it is a reference image for a sketch, not for a finished product. I would expect finished product to have a little bit more information and completion to them, but the whole point of your sketch is to help you with your finished product. So I've just been going through multiple times, multiple layers, darkening things as they need to be darkened, because remember, with colored pencil, it's not very easy necessarily to erase. It is, of course, possible to erase, but you will never be able to get those bright whites back. What I am going to do, though, is erase some of those pencil lines a little bit as I go along, because I don't want the pencil line to be distracting from the pattern. That's why I always say to make your highlight a little bit bigger than what you need, so that when you erase those pencil lines, you can go back in and you can correct anything that might be too big or something like that. It will be much easier to correct it on this end. So now I'm going to come in here and erase some of those areas where I had traced my highlight or circled where the highlight would be. So now you can see without the pencil line around them, they really start to become just highlights. So I'm just, again, erasing some of those extra pencil lines that I don't need, so that the shading can actually be what gives it the form rather than my pencil lines. So if you choose to use colored pencil on your final version of your color wheel piece, you'll definitely want to be doing this step as well. And then once I finish with this step, if it were a final piece, what I would then do is go back into my piece one last time and add any shadows or emphasize any highlights, change any colors, do any more additional color overlapping and mixing, whatever needs to happen to make sure that the shading is helping to make this a volumetric sea turtle, but also to get the idea of the color wheel across as clearly as possible. So once again, I would not consider this necessarily complete for if I was doing it as a final product, but in terms of a sketch, it's very helpful for me to test my color placement so that I would then be ready and feel quite confident going into a final piece based on the sketch and the color placement that is in the sketch. So then I would be ready, like I said, to go ahead and start on my final piece on my Bristol board, which I have given all of you. Or at this point, I would be going back in, if it was my final piece, and I would be tightening up some of the detail, adding a couple more darker areas, possibly using a smidge of black in some areas, like on the eye, for instance, in the very little corners, or the depths, sort of those really, really dark areas. Notice that I'm not pressing down hard with the black because I don't want it to look black. What I want it to do is really turn into a very, very dark version of the color that is already there. But what that's going to do is just sort of make those eyes look even glassier, help make them pop a little bit more, things like that. You can also go back into certain areas with the complement, because what that's going to do is mute that color a little bit, sort of dull it down so that it looks like it's a bit further back there rather than being quite on the same level as that front fin. So those are all different things that if you are working with colored pencil as your final version, you would definitely want to pay attention to. Tiny details, anywhere where you could add a line or have something that helps make your image pop a little bit more, and still keep that color wheel as the prevalent idea in terms of value and shading and tints and shades, tones. The full range of values here comes primarily from the color wheel. The black is used very, very minimally, if at all. So the next video that I'm going to be posting for you guys is going to be when I am painting my globe example and starting to work with the color wheel in that. And for that one, I will be doing acrylic paint, but I will also post a miniature demo, so to speak, of creating a sphere with watercolors, just so you can start to see kind of the difference between the different media, and you can figure out a little bit more of which medium you really want to use for this particular project.